All right, let's transition topics here. Tats, you're up next. What do you got?
Well, I have been when I'm not here and not on the wall in the Shadowlands. Usually from have time to myself at home. I've been working on my Stars Without Number game that I've talked about a few times before. Again, because of what I brought up a whole episode about the trappings and the difficulties of sci-fi RPGs versus fantasy RPGs, and you can go check that out if you're interested. But because of that, I have been watching a lot of online videos and reading a lot of articles about how to be a better GM and how to perfect your craft as a GM. Not necessarily crafting as in making things to play with on the table, though that is part of it.
You got your DMing for Dummies book, right?
Yep. DM for Dummies.
HP
means hit points.
One day I was bored in the books a million. Sorry, a tangent here. I picked up a Dungeons and Dragons for Dummies book because I saw they had it, and it was like tips. I just turned a random page. It was like tips for playing a wizard in 3.5. It was like take the toughness feat. It's just like something that sticks. That's just something that sticks from me.
I mean, that's not bad advice for someone who's brand new.
It's not bad advice. It's not what I would tell them.
No.
But anyways, sorry,
I mean, if out of a core new beginner, I would give them the toughness feat. Sure.
I mean, it really isn't a bad move. I mean, in the grand scheme of things.
I mean, that is, I guess, to be fair, that wizard would have more health, so
right.
He could survive 2 melee attacks.
2 cats.
2 cats would require to take down this wizard of melee combat.
Anyway, let's back on track.
I'm sorry, Tats. I'm sorry.
It's fine, because actually that can kind of play into this a little bit depending on what y'all's answers are. Because I was curious.
You're all robot.
All robot.
Yeah, try again, Tez.
All robot, no action.
Could please put into the file what your favorite.
Nope.
I will wear your skin, flashback.
No.
No.
Yeah, you might have to
leave and come back.
Yeah,
leave and come back. Leave and come back.
Get out of here.
I'm leaving it in this episode just because it's so funny. All right, try again.
Back.
Round 2.
No, he's
nope.
not.
Just no sound that time. It got worse.
Yeah. You there,
Ted?
No,
he's gone forever.
Right.
So D&D for dummies.
Yeah.
You get D4 hit points as a wizard. So at level 1, take the toughness feat.
I mean, I would. Let's see. Out of 3.5, if it was core only for a new player, I'd give him improved initiative first, and then probably improved toughness.
I would definitely give him.
Then there's spell focus, and that's it, really. Spell penetration needs to be later on, but those are like the 3 feats I would tell them to choose from, honestly.
It's actually kind of weird when it's actually funny because playing more of the raw spellcasters, you find that like a lot of your feats like are non-existent.
Yeah. Especially core. Oh,
there he is.
I was waiting to get to like a period point to make a comment, and then sorry.
Okay, all right, let's go.
It was loading for a little while. I still haven't got all the Bakemono out of my internet connection yet.
Yeah.
Just hit him.
So you had said I was curious, and then you went out.
I was curious for you guys what your favorite devices that you've come across, either being told, read, saw, played under, or even that you yourself have come up with. I was just curious what for y'all has really rang true with yourselves as either GMs or players, both ways.
For a device?
Advice.
Oh, advice. Oh, advice. Okay, I thought you said device. I'm like, man.
Roll 20, let me tell you.
Let me tell you about Roll20. I have a love-hate relationship with that damn thing.
So does your SO.
God, I know, right? The best advice that I have heard, there's a lot of good advice out there.
I can go.
Yeah, go. I have to think about this. This is actually kind of tough.
Basically, working on your improv skills.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like probably the best I've heard is being put on the spot can be very trying, and like if you can work and flex those muscles basically. And as even Matt Mercer was just talking about it on last week's talks, or this week's Talks Machina, was basically yes and is probably the most important thing like he has, and just working with what your player wants to do. And
explain the theory of yes and to us, Mel.
So when if someone asks you if they want to try and do something that maybe not even is necessarily supported in the rules, you tell them yes, and then you try and work it into the rules, maybe by a certain kind of role, just because it feels like it makes sense to you. Like there's or he also, or like in Matt Mercer's case, he was talking about fleshing out an area quickly, and that's like working with your players to ask. It's like they first get to a town. Yeah, what are they looking for? It's like, oh well, is there an inn? Yes, there are two, in fact. And there's like he was talking. Yeah.
And I would add to that the yes and because that was pretty high up on my list of ones is the yes but. And I think it goes hand in hand, but I think you should weight more towards the yes and over the yes but.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean that's just the that's just the name of the rule for improv.
But
you can go either direction, really.
You could, but there is a distinction, because saying yes but kind of affirms that like yes you could do that, but you should do it this way. Whereas yes and
there's a problem.
There's a problem with it. Whereas yes and implies that yes and here's how you could do it. Potentially this way.
You could try and do it.
Yeah, you could try and do it. But the yes and I think is specific, but I don't know if too many people are going to linger on the actual two different words, which is really what the core is. You're saying is yes and is what's important.
Also, you also shouldn't just be saying yes to everything. Obviously, like the flip side of that is don't be afraid to say no.
Yeah.
Like I want to decapitate this guy in one strike. You gotta go. No, that's not just that's just not how the rules work at all. Like it's something just so blatantly not gonna work, right?
The leg I just ate was actually from a chicken that actually crossed the road. Therefore,
I mean, like you can, and then there's also like you can also always go with the no part of that rule being is like no, or even better is like what I like to actually do personally, and this is my own personal advice, is instead of saying no, I say you could do that, but you would also know that doing that could lead to X consequence, Y consequence, or Z consequence. You sure you still want to do this?
Yeah.
And I'll leave it to them, but they know that there's going to be consequences on them. So when you kind of place it out there, it kind of puts the ball back in their court, and you can kind of get an idea if they're really going to push through with it. You can always give another reaffirmation. It's like, are you very sure? Because this will cause problems for you and potentially anybody around you.
Right. It's like, I want to just steal from this rich person.
Yeah.
Well, you can try, but there are guards right there.
Yeah. And
if they eventually say that yes, that is really what they want to do, you as a GM now know what that player at least, and the players as a group are looking for out of the game.
Yeah, and it actually kind of helps build on it, which is
or that they just don't expect there to be real consequences, and
that's
maybe
very
you
possible
should also show that there can be.
Yeah, and that's possible too. I mean, that's all gonna be from learning the group. Yeah, you'll have to learn the group, but
like if you steal in front of a guard, they should expect the guard, like if he sees you, to react.
Yeah, and that's definitely something I would always put forward is like don't immediately just latch a consequence on them, and like you can say no. Definitely remember that you have the ability to say no as a GM, but but I also like to organically say is like you can, but there's going to be plenty of potential consequences for you, and they might all hit you at the same time.
Yeah.
And then
no one should be surprised if they break the law that they go to jail, but at the same time there should be some leeway in, I didn't really know that saying that thing would offend that one Crane samurai because I'm a Crane and I'm a lion.
Very big reason for L5Rs.
I generally do say that when it's particularly a lethal scenario when they're like, well, I kind of want to go up there and tell the emperor that he's stupid and he's lying. And
are you sure?
Okay, are you sure you want to do that in the middle of winter court?
Just
When-
be
Here's
aware that
why.
you probably won't be alive after.
Yeah, no,
You know,
so-
after
your
the-
character knows from their upbringing that is a very what they consider to be a very bad move.
Yeah. We call it a very bad move.
generally regarded as a
It's a dick move.
bad move.
You know, you've actually probably done more research in this than I have, Tets, but now, like Mal was saying, I think Matt has a lot of good videos actually about particularly about fleshing out worlds. I like his. I can't remember exactly the steps he said, but he had a video about NPCs and just basically like jotting down. I think like 3 things like where did they come from, what do they want in this moment, and
Where did
something.
they go?
Yeah,
Cotton Eye
like
Joe.
something. Yeah, where they come from, Cotton Eye NPC.
And that's one of the things I struggled with as a new GM was I wanted to know everything about every NPC, and so if they were going to go talk to a random NPC, it was actually going to be one of the ones I made, and I had to learn to pare that back to allow more impromptu improv.
Yeah, and it's fun to have more structured stuff. Like there's no, I don't think there's like, as far as that goes, being more improv or having more notes or stuff, there's not like really a wrong way to GM. But I do think that everyone who wants to GM at least once needs to try to run at least like one session, get like a group you're comfortable with, and like just have no notes and just completely like have an idea of where you want it to go, but don't like have anything written down necessarily, and just like let it roll and kind of like spin ball and like put like the narrative, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Action, I guess, in the PC, like really in their hands.
Yeah.
And when it's
I
think everyone needs to try
thing.
that at least once, because it'll really improve your when things don't go as planned, you are more prepared and practiced at coming up with stuff on the fly. I think that's like probably like the most important skill like a good GM has. And I mean, which is what Mal was saying, is just your ability to improv stuff off the fly.
I think the piece of advice I would give personally, and it's gonna unfortunately I can't cover it all in one shot, so I mean there's so much to give, but the one piece of advice I could give is compromise. The GM and the players have to understand that this is technically a relationship. Yeah, it's a very collaborative story. It's a relationship between two different groups of people, and the GM should understand on a level is that everything can be recompromised. And the player should understand that sometimes your GM might have to come and sit down and say, hey, what you're doing is a little bit overpowered, and it's hard to work around that for me. I'd like to rebalance it. And you gotta, that kind of give and take thing has to happen. I always personally give on the idea that it is harder to take away than it is to give. But understand that sometimes you might give something that you don't think is all that potent, or you might do something because you want it to be cool, and you might find out it's...
That's why rust monsters exist.
That's exactly right.
Or black puddings.
But what it comes really down to is compromise. The GMs have to be open to understanding that as a player, the player might find something is underwhelming, or they might find that some option that they took wasn't as good as they thought it would be. And the GM has to understand that, the players are sometimes they're going to be right bastards and want to, just go around and scurry wherever they like. And sometimes they're going to need a little pushing and prodding. But everybody has to kind of work together to make these things come out just right. So compromise. Learn to talk to your players, and players learn to talk to your GM. Because if you want to go into a game that's just about kicking the door, running to the next room, killing the monsters, and taking the treasure, and your GM's got you set up and ready to go for this awesome role-playing adventure that has very little combat, y'all are already in a problem. So you should definitely talk to one another, kind of get a base of everything, and then learn to compromise on what you guys want.
Yeah, that actually plays directly into the comment that I was going to make. Communication. A lot of GM advice that I come across and I see comes down to communication. And it can be, body language communication. It can be, communicating what's happening through dice rolls, whatever. But as a GM, you have to be aware of the communication going on, but in the table, and this social contract that everybody is signed to play a game together. If you have this, as you're saying, if you have this adventure of RP and there's going to be political intrigue and courtiers are really going to be the best class for this, but I'm not necessarily going to tell anybody. And then you have a whole bunch of bushy who want to go down to the Shadowlands and go venture through the Shadowlands. Like, you have to all be on the same page. But furthermore, it can be something as simple as a GM, you make a snap ruling and you see just visibly slump in their chairs, and you realize, that ruling probably wasn't the best ruling. And you have like half a second to kind of reverse and go, actually, no, I think that you might have a point. Yes, and so I think that communicate like just paying attention and even if it is sitting them down and saying, look, this is the type of game we're wanting to have together, or something as simple as just paying attention to how people are responding to decisions being made and things thrown at them.
Yeah, I think two pieces of advice that I would give, and the first one kind of plays off what you're talking about, is know your group and know what they're looking for, and be upfront about what kind of game you're trying to run, because it just makes things more difficult down the road if especially if you say one thing and it ends up becoming something else. And sometimes that happens. It's natural and everybody likes it. But sometimes people are going to be disappointed, particularly in a game like L5R, where you can be a courtier and that's almost like just for role playing, essentially. Or you can be a bushi, and that you want more combat scenarios, obviously, out of that. Two, one of my favorite, I don't remember where I read it or saw it, but was be afraid to ditch your plot hook when the PCs think of something cooler. So, if, say, like, you have some kind of mystery going on, like, the local, like, Castellan, like, murdered the lord of the castle or something, and your PCs think that it's the kind of, like, heroic paladin guy that you had helping out the investigation. Maybe they suspect it's him, and at times it's cool to ditch your plans that you might have had and maybe had the paladin be in on it with the other guy too, because it basically rewards the collaborative aspect of we're all creating the story together. It gives the PCs vindication because their in character and out character suspicions turn out to be true, and you can sometimes just get cool plot hooks out of it because now maybe the paladin gets away. Why did the paladin want to murder the lord guy? What consequences does that have? Now he's a more interesting character than the typical do-goody paladin who's just trying to help you solve the mystery of why the lord's dead. So that's something I've implemented a lot, and sometimes your players will surprise you with cool hooks that you hadn't initially thought of. So I think that's another good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. Actually, I kind of want to give a second piece of advice on here as well, because I gave one for the game in and of itself, but I also want to give one to as players as well, and players and GMs actually. When you're role playing a character, some of us are, have our comfort levels on how we play our characters. We might want to not do vices. You might just want to kind of do a character that you feel comfortable with. This is a very common thing. It's not unheard of, but one thing I do see a lot, and this on this level, is you want to get people at least immersed in their character, regardless if they do voices, regardless if they want to really be emotive on things or not. If somebody says, well, I want to do this, or I want to say this to somebody, or I tell, you expose something to them, they say, well, I tell this person that. And we say, well, ask them, well, how would your characters say this? Or how would they translate to this to them? How would they say it? Because it encourages you actually saying what needs to be said to them. It encourages that sense of role play. Don't be afraid to get into your character and say what should be said, as opposed to just saying, well, I just, pass off that information to so-and-so.
Even if it's there's also a difference of mindset that leads into that. If you say, my character's going to ask about the lock versus I want to ask the guard about that lock we saw. When you say my character does, or he does, or she does versus what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of GM resources out there, so
there really
lots
is.
of good advice.
There were a lot of good advice. In fact, sometimes when you see things that are advice, you see things that are good advice, and you see things that are bad advice. I don't know that I've ever really seen some horrible advice for GMs. Maybe advice that doesn't apply to your
Yeah.
particular table, but again, that goes down to the communication aspect. I would say too, the other aspect.
Offer to buy the group pizza so they trust you, and then put arsenic all over.
Usually the horror stories are the bad advice. It's more just like, don't do this. But
one of the so the other aspect of GMing beyond just arbitrating at the table, and as far as getting the story before the players have even sat down, just whatever you're planning for the night. One of the biggest pieces of advice I've seen, and I see it repeated all over the place because I think people do need to hear it because they try not to. Don't be afraid to borrow from your favorite sources of media associated with what you're playing.
Rip stuff off all the time, especially if you're having trouble coming up with ideas. And
yeah.
I say rip off, I don't mean that like pejoratively. But I mean, just whatever you like, it can always be a good source of inspiration.
Yeah, it's not like you're selling this stuff, so there's no plagiarism really.
Right. You have a bunch of players L5 and all of them just own it. Well, that was their.
All your samurai turn into robots.
Yeah.
All your samurais turn to robots. Oh, poor Tets.
Yeah.
He's dead again.
He's still gone. He's still gone, Tits.
Come back.
I'm back.
You're back.
Am I back?
Yeah.
I was gonna say that you have all your players are playing samurai, but they all decided to play Ronin. 7 samurai, or maybe 1 or 2 of them have. And they might be big fans of 7 samurai. But because they are seeing things through the lens of their character and through the lens of L5R, just again taking this as an example, you can easily get away with doing a 7 samurai styled story. And all that they are seeing is that they are Ronin that have been disgraced, and they're able to protect these peasants, and they feel good because they protected these peasants. A lot of times players will start to fold in on things. Because part of it too is, let's be honest, the reason why you want to play samurai game is because you enjoy samurai movies. The reason why you want to play fantasy, you love Lord of the Rings.
Some people don't love Lord of the Rings and love fantasy.
No, I know.
I know what you're saying though.
It as an example, there are media that get you into genre, and so then when you play a game around a certain genre, and the GM is borrowing from that piece of media that got you into that genre.
Cyberpunk Shadowrun.
Feel like this is the reason I play the game, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Borrow stuff. I borrow stuff all the time.
Borrow.
Oh yeah.
Take it and do whatever you
borrow's
want.
the politically correct
You don't need to
term
give that
now.
back.
Not steal.
It's yours now.
Not horribly steal.
Some things up. Don't have a Malcolm
Plunder.
Reynolds, but you can have an Alan Reynolds. I don't know.
I mean, you definitely don't.
This is not Superman. This is Superhuman.
I mean, at the end of the day, you don't really have to. You don't have to come up with all of your own ideas. Don't be afraid to pull off from other things and use them as a basis, or even just follow them one for one but reapply a new fresh paint of coat to it.
Yeah. Well, and so
Fresh coat of paint.
Kind of wrap that up, and then ask the last part of the question I was going to ask y'all. Is for resources that you guys may have come across. Obviously, we've said Matt Mercer; he's great.
Yeah, he has. Well, I guess technically, I don't remember who. There's a whole video series of him doing DM tips on D&D or Geek and Sundry. I don't remember.
It's not Geek and Sundry.
Oh, okay, yeah, Geek and Sundry's website or
But
YouTube.
It's unfortunately, if you really like Matt Mercer, they have swapped and switched. people who have done the DM tips, which they're
Yeah, he
just
did a
as
bunch
good,
of the
so-
original, and then they switched to other people because I mean, yeah, other people have their own tips.
Yep, and different perspectives.
Right.
But the person that I really enjoy, and I don't know his actual like name or even like his handle that he goes by, because his YouTube channel is called How to Be a Great Game Master. And he's from South Africa. But he has like a kind of a borderline British accent. But
So he has a South African accent.
yeah, well, but not everybody knows. Like, not everybody knows the South
That's
African
true.
accents.
It's
That,
Dutch.
but it's South,
Like,
yeah, most people are not
it's
going to know
literally
South
Dutch.
African accent. It's just Dutch. It's a
you say
British
South
Dutch.
African, and people just think African, therefore he must be black, and he's actually a white guy. So, that's
Yeah, no. South Africa was a colony.
Yep, it was a colony.
But that was the only reason why I clarified that statement. Anyway, but he has a one statement that he makes almost in every single episode, and this is what's going to tie back to that last statement, is that there's no such thing as an original story. It's the idea that somebody wants something very, very badly and is having a hard time getting it. Are you out there?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of like reductions of stories all the time. Like, yeah, the hero's journey has been around forever. And
absolutely.
Exactly. But the point being that, at any point you can draw something back to one of those major elements and then back to your story. And
I mean, that's why there's a trope for everything. Like, it all already exists.
Yep.
Yeah. Play free GM, play lots of games. Start to GM lots of games because you just get better by doing it more. Pay attention to what people do.
Have to play a bunch of games before you GM. I would say at some point there are people who their first ever game is them GMing, and that's fine. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to do that. Jumping in the deep end can be a lot of fun.
It is. The other thing to remember, and this is really important as well, just like how a writer writes a story, how you GM is going to be unique a bit to yourself.
Oh, yeah.
You're never going to be...
Everyone's got their own style.
Yep, everybody's got their own style, their own format, their own way. And sometimes that may not always mesh well with your players, and you'll have to learn a new style or kind of start from scratch.
I think Matt Mercer is an amazing storyteller, but like the mechanical side of Critical Role leaves a lot to be desired if that's your thing.
Yeah, which if you're going in for the mechanical side, it's probably not your, the favorite meat you could get, so to speak. But that's going to be dependent on you and how your group is and how you want to do it. You're never going to be like John or Bob off to the side. You're going to be your own DM. So don't worry about trying to emulate everything that somebody else does. Learn your style, learn it well, and then work on potentially trying to morph it into things that you think are better for it. But don't try to, it's almost like when you're working out or going to the gym. Don't worry about what the other guy is doing. Worry about yourself. Work on yourself, and then you can look around for you after you're at a good point, and then say, like, I kind of want to be a little more like that, or I kind of want to be a little more like that, and follow into it. But don't try to copy everybody. It's not going to work. And you're going to find yourself always wanting.
Word. I agree completely. All right.
The two final comments. Don't be afraid to copy, but please don't copy.
Yeah. Don't copy original content.
It's not completely don't completely mimic someone. It's fine to borrow bits and pieces.
But you know what? It's okay to, if that is what you're going to, and if everybody comes to the table,
draw inspiration from the story, but like you're gonna have to DM whatever works best for you.
Exactly.
You can't force it.
Exactly.
You can't make X happen. Just do it the way that is the most natural to you. Don't get too hung up about the world that you might be playing in or about the rules of it. Just learn your style first, and then you can spread out from there.
Spread them wings.
Yep.